And we are live, guys. Welcome. How are you doing? James, how are you doing today?
I am doing good. Heavy use of the mute button. Happy Monday.
Yeah, I'm doing great,
Mando,
man.
fantastic.
Very well.
So Bitcoin price action is looking also fantastic today. So it's a very exciting point in the market. I really want to understand everything that has to do with the ETF flows, the macro backdrop, and everything else that could impact the Bitcoin price to really understand when all-time high, when is price discovery back, and because I think it's a very important period in front of us. Then we'll talk about the layer 2, layer 3 protocol risks. Is Vitalik worried? What's going to happen? We'll cover Ethereum, BNB, Sol, the top 3 alts. We'll also cover some altcoins which have had a change in market structure, many of them. Tone, Link, Render, AVAX, Near, and others. We'll cover stock, Tesla, Nvidia, MicroStrategy. We'll cover NFTs and memes and everything else you guys want to talk about. So please remember, write questions. We'll try to bring up many of them. Should we start with the ETF volumes? And I'll give the word over to you, James, because you've made a lot of great content the last couple of days, and let's recap it.
Okay, let's. I've got a couple of slides here. First of all, we did have like a breaking record volume, the best since March, which is the big ETF flow. People counted the ETFs out as being dead because we did have that quiet spell. Basically, from day 41, we're at day 90 now. Today is day 90 of the ETFs. So for nearly 50 trading days, which is like 70 days, which is 2.5 months, not much happened. And I put this little chart together just for this. This shows you that we had the basically biggest flow since week 10. So we are basically going into week 20 this week. So it was great to see that. And I think the biggest news, and I know, Mando, you've been tracking this too, the 13F filings were going to turn a lot of heads. That was really stunning what's going to happen. You know, when you have traditional pension funds and hedge funds and everybody else looking at their competition, and they've been going 13% allocation to Bitcoin or 5.6% or whatever, like the top 3 allocators have an average of 5.6% allocation, which is pretty stunning. And then the final slide that we saw last time we were on the show, Bitcoin price was about, it shouldn't be, it was about 60,700, just under 61,000, and it shot to 67K just from $900 million in flows. So you can pretty much calculate if the only people buying this Bitcoin thing are ETFs, the multiplier is 105. So that's the quick ETF update from my end, and it is a big factor for the the Bitcoin price.
So Vandre, do you want to add some insights here?
Yeah, look, I think that was the big thing for me. It was definitely the biggest week we've seen in months, really, for the ETF. Topped off even by a strong figure on Friday. So big change in sentiment. The week before that, we'd had a small inflow, and this was a relatively big one. We're still below all-time high, so we're still hanging out around 66, 67K. But definitely a good sign. Interestingly, Solana obviously had a good week on the back of it, but Bitcoin did outperform a lot of different things. It's definitely been still a Bitcoin led rally there. In terms of the going down into the data a little bit, the biggest news I did think was the people who were buying. So you had Millennium, who's one of the top hedge funds in the world, had a big position. That may be they may be actually just taking in the funding there, but it's still interesting they had a huge position. Susquehanna, we've already spoken about, but then Wisconsin came in and had a huge position in Bitcoin, which I thought was just kind of wild. Like to see states and pension funds and big, what you would assume slower moving asset managers coming in and buying this sort of stuff. This is the biggest trend I see for Bitcoin here in terms of adoption, that people start to see this FOMO as they see more and more corporates or institutions come in and buy Bitcoin, and people feel like they're being left behind. So very big week because of those filings, in my opinion. Definitely changed the sentiment, and I think we're going to be seeing this on an ongoing basis each quarter.
What do you think are the dominant type of buyers at this point of the market? Is it I mean, the ETF is not it's not a buyer as such. It's like a facilitation device for other people to buy. But what type of people or type of organizations or type of institutions do you think are driving the market here? Is it like individual crypto OGs, or is it corporates, or is it nations, or who is it really?
Well, the ETF filings actually showed a huge variety. I think the Bloomberg analyst came out and looked at this. I think there was over 400 different buyers of the BlackRock ETF alone. That broke all records for a new ETF to have that sort of variation. So you had hedge funds coming in. Some of them were obviously doing this funding trade where you buy spot, you sell futures, you take in the funding. Some of them were buying it outright. Then you saw big pension funds come in. You saw smaller asset managers, weirdly, like some in places where you just wouldn't really assume, like the Midwest of the US, like Wisconsin as a state coming in and buying tens of millions of Bitcoin. Like it seems strange, but I think that just speaks to the universal appeal of Bitcoin. What you're seeing is people, I think, who are looking for a long-term hedge on the world coming in and buying Bitcoin, similar to those sort of people who would be buying gold. So all I got from it is just that there was a wild variation rather than just like these singular people are buying it. 400 different institutions buying even the BlackRock ETF points to massive diversification in buyers. And I think that's a very, very good thing for Bitcoin.
James, do you want to add something to that? Because your slide there where you showed what's the factor, meaning if $1 moves into the ETFs, Bitcoin market cap has gone up $100, $105. That's what this chart shows, right? And of course, there are other buyers than ETFs. So the full it's two parts of this effect. One is that there's limited people selling. So when you put in $1, price goes up, market caps goes up more than $1. And then, of course, there are also other buyers. Do you have any feeling for what's the dominant type of buyers here at this point of the market?
So what I'm doing is adding up. I hope the volume is okay. I jacked it to the full, so I'll try and eat the microphone. But there's some couple of weird things going on. First of all, I've read reports where 85% of the ETF volume is institutional, and I've read other reports where 15% is institutional, 85% is retail. So we're trying to get to the bottom of exactly who owns what. But remember as well, retail investors own part of many cases, hedge funds and pension funds, etc. So in the end of the day, they're allocating on behalf of retail. But the thing that's kind of more concerning to me is there's been a lot of talk about IBIT. IBIT went 4 straight days, $1 billion in volume, trading volume every single day, and not one Bitcoin moved. So there is either a lot of misunderstanding or there's some market maker games happening behind the scenes, between the Coinbase account, Coinbase Prime, which rolls up to Coinbase. What are they recording on the books? What's in their vault balance? We don't have any IBIT transparency around their actual addresses. What is happening over the counter versus Coinbase? What is a direct transfer maybe from Grayscale? There's lots of weird stuff happening, and I can't put my finger on it. There's a guy called Tyler Durden on Twitter who is basically trying to expose stuff, and I've been talking about this since it all began, because we had really weird anomalies. We had massive volumes that were directly correlated to Bitcoin buys at the very beginning, and that disappeared. Then there were still massive volumes but zero buying or selling. So are they stacking on behalf of somebody? What's happening to the money? Are they selling at a Bitcoin price and then buying when Bitcoin price dips and then reflecting that in the actual holdings? I don't know. It's just really suspect. And hopefully, in this day and age, it's ridiculous that they have to do kind of cash transfer, move cash into an asset and then transfer it back out into cash. It's just so redundant. Like if you were an alien in space looking down at this process, you'd say, you've got the technology to do it the proper way. Why is it so convoluted? So again, something weird going on. Mando, I'm interested in your take if you believe there are any crazy shenanigans. I think last week you said you do suspect something.
I suspect that it's now very, very easy for some of these institutions to move the market. And like, it's difficult to work out if price is following flows or flows are following price. But I think to a large extent, when you start to see inflows, people start to buy as well. So I think BlackRock could very easily post an inflow or a series of outflows, let's say, like they did for a few days, time the bottom, and then have one of their own internal funds come in and buy it. So I think there's a lot of power there, which I think is kind of unchecked at this stage. What I would say in terms of the volumes, I would highly suggest that the high volumes to do with market makers. So a number of different market makers, if you remember a few months ago, said that they would market make the BlackRock ETF, Wintermute, Jane Street. I don't know if DWF are involved, but like all the major market makers in the space, these are high frequency traders. Essentially, they just trade in and out all day. They often pump volumes to actually get people interested. I would suspect it's to do with that. They're doing the same. I think they announced even last week they were going to market make the Asia ETFs as well. But I would suspect that volumes is no longer as correlated with inflows as it was before, because market makers essentially are there pumping the volumes.
So this is a perfect entry to this great question in the comments. So who is selling? And of course, it's not been him personally, but the outflows have been largely concentrated to one entity. And Grayscale CEO is stepping down right now, which is a big news. And let me share this. He just posted on Twitter or X, thanking everyone. So what's your take on this? Does it impact anything? Does this signal anything? If anyone has been sleeping under a rock, the big outflows have been from Grayscale, and Grayscale CEO is stepping down.
They've been slightly tied in what they can do, right? There's a broader picture here, which is Grayscale is owned by DCG. And DCG has been facing a number of different issues. Genesis, one of its companies, went bankrupt. DCG has a number of different loans to some of its subsidiaries. They have had to keep that fee high just to keep the lights on at DCG. So if you're the CEO of Grayscale here, you've kind of been tied with anything you've been able to do. They did introduce a lower fees alternative recently, but it hasn't actually done that amazing. So he's probably sitting there thinking he doesn't have many options here. I don't think they're going to reduce the fees at Grayscale, and their AUM is already down, imminently about to be overtaken by BlackRock. So,
yeah. James,
yeah, I think.
Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Please continue.
No, that was it. I think he's going to be moving. This was kind of expected. He can't really do anything in this position.
James, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, he managed a honeypot for 10 years, and there was a lot of very strange stuff. You know, the cash and carry trade between Spot and Grayscale for the longest time. It was a big money maker for all the VCs, who we'll talk about later as well. And I think there comes a time in everybody's life where you just got to move on. And him staying there while this thing just bleeds out is not a good look for him or a good look for the firm. And Mando is dead right. They needed that 1.5% fee to keep the lights on in the rest of the organization. That has huge liabilities to pay out as well. And there's also some crazy stuff going on with Barry, who is the man behind a lot of this too. And there's a weird conspiracy theory floating out there as well, which I will not mention because it's very allegedly. But dig into it, you'll find it. Check out Barry and Grayscale and DCG. You'll see it.
Final point on this with ETF, because we talk a lot about ETF, and someone asked, why do we do that? Is this even relevant? So, James, you had a fantastic slide the other day where you showed how big are these ETF inflows or outflows compared to what is mined, because mining was a big thing. Everyone talked about the halving where less coins are mined. So, does this even matter? Do you have that slide handy, James?
I don't have it handy. I can dig it up, but the point
you
is,
can just tell the result.
Yeah, I remember all the numbers. So Wednesday last week, the amount of consumption by the ETS was 10x daily issuance, which is 4,500 Bitcoin. It was about 4,800 Bitcoin. Thursday, it was 9 times daily issuance, and Friday, it was 8 times daily issuance. So if you add up just those 3 days alone, and the only supply coming onto the market is from Bitcoin miners, that means Bitcoin is pretty much sold out until towards the end of June of this year. So that's a dramatic statistic. So the question does come as like, who is selling? Because the good miners are trying to hold as much as they can because they know price appreciation is coming. And the reason we talk about ETFs is because that is driving the Bitcoin price. That's why we hit a new all-time high before the halving, because of the flows. The flows have a dramatic impact. Now, there is some other interesting stuff that has skewed the on-chain data, and that is long-term holders that had stuff in wallets or had stuff on Grayscale swapped out. And that shows you how, even before the halving, a lot of long-term holders were selling, which is unusual behavior at this stage of the bull run. But getting your finger on exactly who is selling and why, I don't know. And there'll always be speculation too. There's hedge funds in there buying spot and playing with options and derivatives and futures. And by the way, those hedge funds get it wrong a lot because they're new to Bitcoin and think they're smarter than the rest, but they end up getting shafted by the OGs in the space. So it's fun to watch.
Yeah, I think some people panic sold. I said this last week that I felt like the cope was back in the market. Like when you rally, you feel as though some people are suddenly underexposed. Like they assumed that Bitcoin was going to go down to like 45, 40K. And a lot of people sold out. Like this rally this week, I feel it being in the space every single day. A lot of people have sold during this chop. They've been shaken out. And some of them may have been new entrants who bought the ETF, who were just like, you know what, I can't deal with the vol. But some of them were, they've been in this market for a while. You can see it on the timeline. You can just see it. Like this is starting to feel a little bit more like a hated rally when you saw Bitcoin rally back up to 67K, particularly when you saw Solana do its move as well. Like you just feel as though people have reduced their exposure. I think you're muted again, CTO.
Thank you. Yes, I felt so too. There was a lot of angry people last week and last couple of days when prices actually gone up. So definitely it was the case. Let's try to close the picture here. What is happening with the macro perspective? Because of course, Bitcoin doesn't live in isolation. And what's happening with the macro perspective? The US elections that has gotten an enormous polarity now, it seems, between the two parties. One party is saying perhaps they will completely change direction if they win. The other parties, currently in charge, and so on and so forth. What does all this mean? Let's share a few perspectives. I can just add one point on the TA before I give the word over to you. And the main picture here is that yields rejected at resistance, and that is a positive sign for Bitcoin. So now I give. Who wants to start? Mando, do you want to go first this time?
Give it a go. Yeah, why not? So CPI was the main thing last week. It came in kind of bang on expectations. It was slightly softer than expectations, and that's what really saw the rally and everything. You saw stocks hit all-time high. You saw gold hit all-time high, and you saw Bitcoin kind of head back north. So that was the big data point last week. This week it's going to be Nvidia earnings, which are coming up. There's Fed minutes coming out, but largely what we saw over the last week is people getting less. We expect to see less hawkish policy come out of the US. The other interesting thing is we spoke about for a while on the last show about the difference between Biden versus Trump. Interestingly, the Senate also came in and ratified the what the House had done, which is basically limit the SEC's rules about crypto accounting for financial institutions. Now, interestingly, it looks now Biden had said he was going to veto that. Now it looks like he's not going to veto it, or at least there are rumors that he is not going to veto it. So what you did see over the last week is actually a bit of a softening in the policy of Biden towards crypto. And the rumors were that he was softening it because there was such bipartisan support for this crypto rule. So I thought that was really interesting because obviously it did feel as though last week it was that one was very much against each other. What you have seen is a slight softening. I would still say the majority of the crypto hawks are in the Democrat camp right now. But definitely an interesting move. I thought there. Macro, like I said, this week I think will be relatively quiet. The main thing will be Nvidia, and that might even affect some of the sectors in crypto. Some of the AI earnings.
James, what's your take? Man on the ground.
Yeah, take is simple. Crypto has become political. if you turn your back on crypto, you turn your back on maybe somewhere between 30% and 25% of the voting pool. And I think the advisors are smart enough to say, okay, remaining anti-crypto is the kiss of death for your political career. Especially now where big voices, what's the name of that billionaire Cuban last week? They basically said you are denying people the ability to get ahead. and that poor guy has lost so much in crypto himself, but he's still bullish on crypto, which is great. So I think they just have to eat crow, and the Republican side, the right, has done the right thing by embracing it, even though 4 years ago they were very anti-crypto, very pro-dollar. Now they know it's something that cannot be quashed. So it's embrace or die, as we say.
There was actually, just to touch upon that a little bit more, there's a really good interview with Mike Novogratz, who's kind of an OG in that he runs, what's the name of the company he runs? But he runs one of the main crypto market makers and investment companies. Galaxy is the name of it. Anyway, he came out and said that to be against crypto right now is basically coming out and saying, I hate dogs, which sounds silly, but there are more crypto owners than there are dog owners in the US. There are more crypto owners than there are dog owners in the US. So to say come out and have such an anti-crypto policy, there's something like 85 million crypto owners in the US, that it's just silly. It's shooting yourself in the foot going into an election.
That was a great way of putting it. We said something, we talked about it last time. Like, if you say that I go out in an election, I say I hate dogs. People who don't have a dog, who don't care about dogs, they don't care. So you're not going to win any votes on that. Cat owners are not going to start voting more for you because of that. But all the dog owners are going to vote for the other party. So that's exactly what they are doing. And we said it's like hole in the head. How could you come up with that kind of strategy? We three here can understand it's dumb if your objective is to win the election for any party. And yet they are doing it. But maybe they're figuring it out. So if they figure it out, we'll have two parties who really back off on this very aggressive stance against crypto. So if we conclude all this now, what's your take on the market? Are we going towards price discovery soon, or is it looking rough? Mando, do you want to start?
I'm going to stick to what I said before. I think we could range in this 55 to 75K period for a little bit longer. It definitely looks stronger than it did last week. Like I said, I think I said at the end of last show, I think it could be at 66K. We're at 66K. I think if I was to be asked that question again this week, I'm going to say higher. But I think it's one of those ones where I think Bitcoin dominance could rise, other than maybe Solana going higher. I still feel as though crypto itself might lag just straight Bitcoin. So Bitcoin could be higher, and I think a lot of your bags, if you're not owning Bitcoin or Solana, could maybe be sideways or lower.
James, what's your take? You're muted.
As per this little image here, we are not far from a new all-time high, or a lot of this. I saw this morning on the internet. I thought it was very funny. Things are closer than they appear. It doesn't take a lot to move. We saw, just since our last show together a week ago, we saw a $7,000 move happen, and most of that happened in 24 hours. So could we add another 7,000, make a new all-time high in 24 hours? Absolutely. But really, this is really driven by not retail investors, but what the ETF does and what the stackers do, like Mr. 100, and what Hong Kong does. Hong Kong currently is lagging the buying right now. They didn't buy in last week, so they're overdue. They're a little bit late. And between those three players, again, that's 5 to 10x the daily issuance. And the question is, what are other people doing? Maybe there's long-term holders that are just taking profits for, as Raul would say, lifestyle chips. Maybe there's some people just moving into meme coins. We don't know, but some weird stuff is happening.
Yeah, thank you. I think so too. And another learning because we talk a lot about ETFs, but the ETFs are an important event. It will actually have a lot of impact on the price. It's not only mining, these are big numbers moving in and out. So it is important. And then one learning from the gold ETF was that it took a very long time when it launched, like a long time back. It did create a very long bull market in gold. And I do think it actually created it. It wasn't only like correlation there. So if you have big inflows into an asset, it should impact price. That seems a reasonable thing. So I'm positive also. I think it looks great. And let's move on to...
Can I ask the charts? Is there any point of resistance you see there? Like, where do you think we're gonna? Like, where's the main point that people should be looking at? Because I think we're going higher, but I would like to kind of have a guess about where we should be looking at as key pain points.
I think if switching down the time frames a little bit and looking on the 6-hour candle, we kind of are there now. Clearly, there's an element of resistance here, exactly where we are now, or a few $100 higher, 67,200 maybe. So, but I think this is a minor point. I think the bigger resistance where we really turned almost 10 times back in late March, early April, that was 71,400. So I think if we clear where we are now, the next resistance is 71,400. If we clear that one too, then I think we're off to the races. I think that's more important than the brief all-time high that we had over here, because if looking at volume profile, frankly, not much Bitcoin has ever exchanged hands at those prices. So I don't think it matters so much. So that's my thinking. And I mean, the trend never turned down. Of course, there's a lot of proxies for trend. I have one that I like. It never turned down. But of course, things were rather uncertain here since the whole of May. But now it's not really. I feel that it has cleared up. The horizontal support held. We had this channel that had a clean break on the upside. Trend never turned down. So I think for now it looks good. But those are the levels I'm looking at.
All right. Well, that's my prediction for next week. I think we hang out around 71K for a little bit. I think we'll probably take some time to get through that level. But yeah, it feels like we're heading higher. It feels like from here we'll gap through this, and we could head there.
And I have one thing to add too. I know for a fact there are pension funds having meetings right now as we speak, after the state of Wisconsin news and after some of the top hedge funds allocating so much. Many are not. There's 30,000 hedge funds on the planet. There's only a handful in this game right now. They all have to follow. They are like sheeple. And they also know it's kind of a first mover advantage game. So you got to get in as quickly as you can before this thing does pounce. So these meetings are happening as we speak. They're just determining, can they get board approval? How much can they allocate? And then which ETF do they buy? Or do they buy a mixed bag of them all? Those things are happening behind the scenes right now. But again, there is a lag, but there's also a sense of urgency. So I'm confident the next 3 months will be super interesting. And the next set of 13Fs will be fascinating.
Let's switch gears. Let's move into the main altcoins. And I'll introduce this topic, then I'll hand the word over to you. Because there are two things that really sailed up. One is a reminder here that a lot of the L2s and L3s are actually not that decentralized. Of course, this is maybe dramatizing it a little bit, but a reminder that roll-up as a service providers can literally shut down the entire network. And we have mentioned it here previously on the DCA, and that is a concern, I think, especially both from a technical perspective, a risk perspective, but also from a regulatory perspective. Then we have another topic which is kind of a little bit related. Ethereum has a lot of stuff going on always. There is a lot of people working. There's a lot of discussion, open debate, which is a positive thing. Vitalik has written a very interesting blog post 3 days ago here that's worth reading, discussing a lot of things, but it's too much to go into. But my takeaway is that they are discussing big things. They are discussing like, can we have nodes running that store the data, or can we not? Should we eliminate the history storage responsibility for nodes? Those are big, fundamental, existential questions almost for the network. And they are kind of discussing these things. He's also saying that the idea, because the fundamental idea was that everyone should be able to run this proof of stake validation. In practice, most people are not. They find that it's too big of a threshold. You have to hold 32 ETH. You have to, there's technical challenges and so on and so forth. And they're talking about how these things should be changed. And these are kind of big, fundamental, existential questions for the protocol. And it kind of worries me a little bit that its Ethereum proposition has really been that, it's not the cheapest, it's not the fastest, but it's reliable and stable. And suddenly, the very fundamentals of the protocol is discussed and up for debate. I didn't really like this, seeing these things at the same time as seeing these things with layer 2, layer 3, which is really the hope for the scaling solution. And I'm saying this as the biggest Ethereum lover. I felt I'm pro innovation. I felt that Ethereum really created the whole smart contract world. I really love Ethereum, but this isn't really good. Before giving you the word to James, what's your take on this, Mando? You're deep into these ecosystems.
Yeah, like I don't want to come on the show and kind of just bash ETH each week. Like, obviously, I think you can have a portfolio across all three. I think right now, Bitcoin, ETH, and Solana. I think ETH is going through some real challenges. Like, we have this system where it's gone from being ultrasound money to now going back inflationary. It's gone from a scaling solution, which is now going to be via L2s, and it's no longer the fastest chain. You can have it on the L2s, but I think the main thing that still ETH people hold on to, and one of the strongest narratives, is that it's like the most secure, that it's perhaps the safest, it will last the longest. This is a big, big issue, in that as we move more and more funds to L2s, L2s are not decentralized. The number one thing they're normally centralized around is their sequencers. And you've seen some of the major L2s start to attempt to move forward, but a lot of them are held up by essentially 4 different people or 5 different people on a multi-sig who govern that sequencer. Optimism, I think, came out maybe last month and said they were going to try and go more decentralized. That's got nearly 10 billion of TVL. Arbitrum also came out. That has a very central. I think it's both of its sequencers for Nova are run by the Arbitrum Foundation. Base, similarly, goes through the Optimism stack. And so we end up realizing is that so many of these L2s, they're not decentralized. It's not the dream of ETH that's being purported right now, because they had to scale via a different route. It's meant that they've had to cut corners essentially, or given up part of that decentralized narrative. You still have some of the security of the L1 layer, but they're not necessarily decentralized. There's also been another bit of FUD this week, which is the ties between the Ethereum Foundation and EigenLayer, which is one of the main restaking protocols, and that's come out in the last 2 days. Like, a lot of the Ethereum Foundation staff are actually advisors to EigenLayer, and this dominates the restaking protocol narrative. I just think that ETH is going to take some time to come back because of this sort of stuff. I still think it's a really interestingly built system. For it to work right now, it actually requires scale to be used. But to get there, I see a lot of challenges. Like, I see a lot of challenges that people are going to have to give up a number of different core principles, and one of them being that decentralization also is going to be challenged if they're going to scale this route, or it's going to take a long time to get it to the required level of decentralization.
James, a lot of credit to you, because a lot of these risks you have highlighted 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when no one really saw it. I lost count. Maybe it's even more years. So what's your thought seeing this now?
As you know, I always had this. I always try and think of things in very simple terms, so my simple brain can understand them. But I always saw L2s as a band-aid. They're not solving the fundamental problem. Now, there's a new problem happening over the last year, and that is the commoditization of L2s. We saw, for years, Matic was the leading L2. Then it was cannibalized by Arbitrum, and then all these others that are hit the fray. There are scores of them, literally many of them, and that's that whole. Some people call it kind of copy paste, and trying to find one little edge of differentiation. They do. And then these L2s not only are eating each other, but they're eating the majority of fees from the mothership, which is Ethereum, which is bringing about the flippening from Sol. And now it's just, still, it doesn't solve the problem. For me, what's most important with crypto is finality. And they are still very delayed. I mean, I had to try to do a transaction the other day. It was 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I had time to go get lunch and come back and still wait. And that's just unacceptable in today's world, which should be real time. Also, the L2s are not generating enough revenue to justify their operational expenses because they're trying to compete on price, and they're making themselves so cheap they're not able to cover their costs. And if this continues, ETH is slow and expensive, and the L2s are eating each other, and they've got no finality. It just doesn't work. And then you have this huge centralization thing that Mert popped up. I think, Mando, you shared that earlier, where all of the tokens for a whole bunch of L2s are all kind of all held together or something. I didn't dig into that. So I just see way more problems than solutions right now. I don't see a way out of this. And remember, ETH is a 800-pound gorilla. It's flying in the air at 35,000 feet. It's very difficult to re-architect, especially with the huge amount of tech debt going back 8 or 9 years. And it'd be like changing the wings on the plane in the air. You just simply can't do it. CTO, I'm interested in your CTO experience on this one.
Oh, absolutely. I think the very complexity of the Ethereum chain is really perhaps the biggest problem. It's gotten very complicated. And I'm not even sure, perhaps Vitalik, but I don't know if there's anyone else who can kind of overlook the code and actually know how everything works. I think it's gotten really complicated. And then at the same time, you're talking about big existential almost changes to that protocol. It's very difficult. I mean, this is reflected in price. It's not just us three here feeling this. Clearly, the market in general does. Key support turned into resistance, and now it's basically if it turns down here, it will happen a second time now that support turned into resistance, and it couldn't possibly look any worse. Of course, I think the only thing that could save Ethereum here is some regulatory thing, that Ethereum ETF gets approved and no other protocol gets approved because they are the oldest and most decentralized or something like that. If that becomes a political or SEC decision or something like that, perhaps that would change the picture. But if we're not getting that, this is not looking so great, to say the least. This chart is looking absolute garbage. It can't possibly look any worse. Supports are turning into resistance, and trend is down on every possible conceivable time frame. Couldn't look any worse. And then if we compare with other two, because there's actually two other major L3 alts, they look completely different. Even BNB is looking good. For reasons that's kind of a little hard to figure out, because no one talks about Binance Smart Chain anymore. And of course, Solana also is looking fantastic. So there's like this enormous contrast between these three charts. Ethereum on one hand, the other two on the other side, and they look completely different. They're like mirror images almost. So Solana chart is looking great. And we talked about it last time. Trend never turned down. Horizontal support held, looking fantastic. Also, if we compare it, I'm showing I forgot to say that, but I'm showing the altcoin to BTC charts here. Everyone can see that dollar price goes up, but what if we take out the speculative part of the dollar versus Bitcoin price? It still looks great. The Solana to BTC chart still looks great, and of course the Sol to USD chart as well. So, James, do you have any news to share about Solana? You have really been the champion through this whole bull run.
They used to call me the Solana. I used to be memes about me on Twitter. I was called the Solana help desk with a little headset. Every time it had an outage, I'd be to blame. But if you just open that little chart there I'm sharing right now, It just shows you the complete domination. I think for me, as far as I'm concerned, there are kind of three big use cases right now for crypto. One is DEX activity, number two, NFTs, and number three, stablecoins. And Solana just absolutely, like, I had a vision of this happening, but maybe not until 2027. And we're already here. And I always talk about how fickle crypto users are. They will go to the best, cheapest, fastest chain, wherever it is. And that's exactly what's happening now. And that's kind of part of the challenge that the L2s are trying to have. But if you go and have a user experience, I just advise anybody, go play with another chain and just try it and then come back to Solana. This is the whole product market fit and the user experience, which is very understated in crypto, and chains don't focus on that. And that's why, Solana is the black hole. There's one other thing. This is the
This
NFT
chart. Just to talk about that chart briefly.
Yeah,
It's 3x. It's 3x all the other blockchains combined, nearly. Like, that is crazy. 3 times all the other blockchains combined is how many transactions are going through on the DEX. Like, I know you keep on talking, James, but just looking at these figures, it is crazy to see that dominance.
Exactly. It is mind-blowing. And the same also goes for NFTs, the same goes for stable coins, etc. It's just the black hole, as I call it. So that's all we can say. And a lot of people think, oh, my chain X, which has been around for 7 years, it's going to come back. They're going to fix something and it's going to take over. And the reality is it's not. So hope is not a strategy, everybody. Just follow the developers, follow the users, follow the money. It's not a hard calculus.
This again, it's more than all the other blockchains combined for NFT users. Like, it's not just beating, it's dominating the whole space right now. Which I just think is, you just can't ignore. This is Solana's cycle. We said it when we were talking about the show a few weeks back. Like, Solana was trading at 120, all altcoins were down. I think we even said on the show, like, if you had a bag that's been underperforming this year, you can buy something like Solana, which has got this huge adoption curve this cycle, and you can buy it down. Solana's up 50% since we said that. It's up 50%, and I bet you a bunch of the altcoins are either flat or lower since then. Bitcoin, I think, was trading around 60K at that time, so it's up 10%, but a lot of altcoins have not really bounced. Solana is up 50% from that moment. So it's tough to buy it again into it now because you had that opportunity to, but this just feels like Solana's cycle. It just feels like this could keep going. Bitcoin, I feel like could be range just because of the way it's trading. It's very, very difficult. I don't know. It could gappy, but Solana, I think, could gap very easily with these sort of figures. Like, it's crazy to see this sort of adoption.
Yeah, and remember as well, and well said, Mando, the target is there. Okay, you know what the target is? That's the ETH market cap. And again, in 2021, I built a model with all these different kind of flippening layers and percentages of ETH over time, and we just smashed through 20% of ETH market cap. So could this go higher? Yes. Will some of the competition shrink? Yes. Is there a lot of liquidity in the competition that needs to flow into the black hole? Yes. And I think one of the action we've seen over the last few days, even, we had a very strong weekend for Solana. And I know for a fact there are people who are holding on to their bag X, and they just capitulated last weekend. So what you're seeing is not people kind of taking their fiat and buying into chain X. They're selling chain Y and buying chain X. And that's, I'm sure Mando and C2, you see that happening yourselves. I'm interested in how you see that.
I think,
yes. Yeah, I actually just realized something that is very interesting. Let me share 2 things, then I'll give back to you, Mando. First thing, just to repeat something that we talked about several times here. Vitalik talks about this, how people should be able to run a node to make everything as decentralized as possible, which is great. But the thing is that most people don't care about decentralized. It has to be decentralized enough, but then they care about permissionless. We've said this so many times. They want to get access to the economic system. They want to be able to get on the DEX, do their trade as fast and cheap as possible. Then whether Vitalik is able to run his node on his laptop with 2.1 terabytes or not, they don't really care. And then we can debate all day here if, which is most decentralized, Ethereum or Solana, for this or that reason. The point is that most people doesn't really care, because that's not what they're after. They're after permissionless. And I think that's what we're seeing. The other interesting thing, which is actually happening right now, this is Sol versus ETH price chart. And actually that one is on the verge of breaking out right now, which I didn't realize until exactly this moment. So we have a possible continuation here, much bigger leg up perhaps for Sol versus ETH. This is comparing the market caps. So, I mean, anything, every crazy thing that seems impossible can happen in technology. It feels always like the incumbent is so big that they can never be taken over, but then it happens. Slow processes. I don't know what will happen, but I think it is possible. Now I will give the word back and I be quiet.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this is there is an event this week for ETH, which is the ETH ETF. We will find out if it's going to be rejected or accepted. It's highly anticipated that it will be rejected. I would imagine you could see a little bit of a revenge pump on ETH on the back of that. Like, it's underperformed for so long versus all the other majors. I personally, if I had ETH bags or big ones, I would probably look to sell into that revenge pump. I think that what we've seen is that the revenge pumps of ETH have never really lasted that long. That chart is a prime example. Like, you have these periods of a few days where it rallies back and everyone's like, well, that was the bottom, and then it goes lower. And that isn't just because of the chart. Like, we've just shown, Solana is doing 3 times all the other blockchains combined in terms of DEX transactions. It's got all the other blockchains combined in terms of new NFT users. The revenue, I think, is beating, or the token economic value is beating ETH now, and the chain is still a fraction of the market cap. It's still 20%, like you said. So for me, I just can't get away from this as Solana's cycle. Like, I think there will probably be some sort of a reaction to that ETH ETF decision, and I imagine just because of the way that ETH's been beaten up, that it will rally. But I do think you've really, really got to consider Solana this cycle. You're muted again, CTO.
Thank you. Let's talk about some more altcoins, because a lot of you are asking for that. Let's cover some. I have put a few on the list here, but we can talk about others as well if you guys like. One which I think was interesting, that I know there is a lot of Link fans. That one has been trending down for a very long time, but it did actually form a double bottom on the BTC chart and a head and shoulder failure on the USD chart, but it has not been enough to turn the trend back up. Is Link anything that you're looking at? They do have a use case, they're working as an oracle, and they're actually doing something as opposed to many other chains. Any of you have any thoughts on Link?
Link had a big partnership this week, which was announced alongside a number of different banks. Link is the biggest oracle in the space. What's an oracle? They basically provide off-chain data and they put it on chain. It's 100% a needed use case of crypto, and Link is the biggest one. The token itself has had a very good first cycle, and then has kind of been slightly jaded by the fact that we were speaking about this last week. Like, the foundation comes in and sells Link on every single pump. So I 100% think that Link is essential blockchain technology infrastructure. I'm still not a buyer of that token, just because I feel as though even with massive adoption, you might not get a great return on that token. But I do think it's one of the better ones. Like, out of all the other coins, which were last cycle's coins or even the cycle before that, Link's one which will probably stick around. It'll be around in crypto next cycle and the cycle after that. So if you have a long enough time horizon, I do think it's going to be around.
James, do you have any thoughts on Link?
Yeah, I go back to, and in full disclosure, I did dabble in a thing called Pith, which I saw as a potential Link killer. Got into it, but got out because the unlock. So just so people know that, and that has been very weak lately. But again, I go back to the technology and the number of integrations. Or the Link is the 800-pound gorilla. But when you look at the amount of integrations, the amount of transactions that Pith is supporting, it's far superior. So there will be a flippening down the line because better, cheaper, faster, and better technology, more integrations will win the Oracle day. But I would never allocate heavily to an Oracle because it reminds me of the dot-com boom back in the late 90s. Everybody was talking about these things called DSL companies. You probably remember that, CTO, back in the day, DSL. And people were saying, wow, there's like 400 of them, but they all have extreme heavy infrastructure and sales cycles and all that type of stuff. And they all fizzled out. So Oracles for me are like DSL companies in the 90s. Therefore, I don't find them that exciting in terms of return and alpha.
How about Near? A lot of people are talking about Near. Is that something that either of you have followed?
Yep. And I've compared it to all the other chains in every single metric. It's good. It's right up there. If Solana didn't exist, I'd probably be in Near. That's that simple. But then again, they have problems around value capture, breadth of dApps, that type of stuff, adoption, tokenomics. These are the kind of the black eyes that I see when I analyze Near.
Yeah, I think that's it. Like Near is interesting tech. It's a fast, cheap blockchain. It's just not at that stage of the adoption cycle, I think. We spoke about this last week. The only one which I felt like could get, millions of users very quickly was probably Ton. There is one this week which is in focus, which is Phantom, which is an old coin, which is basically doing a 1-for-1 swap to a new coin. And sometimes you see coins pump on the back of that. FTM, that they're upgrading to Sonic is the name of their upgrade. It's going to be S, the token. That is going to be a parallelized EVM scaling solution, meant to be incredibly fast. They're claiming it's going to be faster than Solana pre-Firedancer. Let's see. That's one which was rallied last cycle on a huge amount of TVL. It's definitely one which people are looking at again with this upgrade.
And again, you could have, my thesis is very simple. You could have the best technology, the best chain, but when you rebirth something and you try spin it up with an upgrade, even if it's faster, you still have the legacy, and also you don't have the adoption. So I think Cardano has more daily active users than Phantom, and that's not an easy problem to fix. Community is a massive hurdle to overcome. Mando, I'm sure you agree with that.
Sorry, I was muted.
Now
I was muted there. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think one thing that I've realized about this is just fast isn't necessarily just the winner. And you realize this in crypto. Solana is regularly being the fastest blockchain, but it's not just about that. Even when there was a more level playing field, it takes a long time to build up culture and trust. And I think what I'm talking about there with Phantom is really like the beginnings of potentially building back trust. This was a coin, if you zoom out, which was at crazy levels in 2021. Like this really did rally very, 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 very strongly back then, or 2022 even. But for me, this is more just like, can they put up something which starts to see an increase in TVL? It's still low hundreds of millions in terms of TVL, so it's still a long way to come back. So maybe you could see it rally. I think it's only in the low billions of market cap right now. To get to the sort of levels that Solana's at, like, it takes years. It takes years to get a trusted NFT community that's going to come in and buy every single drop. A trusted meme coin community that like believes in that they can come in and gamble on that chain, that they enjoy the user experience, wallet integrations with different sectors, like we saw with Coinbase. Like, these things take a long time. So I don't think there's going to be a Solana killer this cycle. Maybe next cycle, but for me, it's more like of the chasing pack, when you're gonna get in, and most of them are just nowhere near on the adoption cycle. It's more like you're buying them very early in that.
How do you see Ton then? That's maybe the wild card here. They do have a lot of users with the Telegram app, and they have gotten to a notable position on the market cap race. Do you see any chances there?
It's the only one I can see having users that people could say, wow, thing's got, tens of millions of users. That being said, as James said, like it's still largely governed by the foundation. It's obviously linked to Telegram. Arguably, you could say that they are less, therefore, dependent on dumping on users from that foundation. Like they could perhaps have a longer term view about this, given they have a very profitable other app. But let's see. I do think that's one to watch. Out of all the other L1s, I can see having adoption. That's one to watch. The others I feel like are very early in that cycle, whereas Ton, I think, could go from 0 to tens of millions of users very quickly. And what I'm seeing, interestingly, is that a bunch of the exchanges are now looking to support some of their ecosystem coins. You saw Notcoin, which was a very, very big listing across a number of different exchanges this week, or last week even. I think you'll see a few more things related to Ton start to get listed, and we'll see how that one goes. But it's one I have in my periphery. I don't own any, but it's definitely one that I'm paying attention to.
Yeah, and my quick view on Toncoin, there's 3 matters. One is, yes, they can lick the adoption problem, but number 2, the tokenomics suck. And the other issue is, of course, the US government is likely to try ban Telegram, just like they're going to ban TikTok. And that is a huge risk.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah,
that's one risk.
Let's move on the agenda. Let's talk about some stocks, because there are a few very noteworthy events coming up. NVIDIA being one of them. Should we...
Before we jump in, I do want to show one thing before we leave crypto subject is VC dumpage. This little chart here came out last night. And what's fascinating about this chart is it's completely mind-blowing. And anybody who's been around crypto for a long time knows the game. But this time we didn't expect it to be around as much. Last 2021, it was extreme. But now everybody's talking about the VC and centralized exchange cartel, which teams are pushing to launch at the highest possible fully diluted valuation. Okay. And they launch fast on the tier 1 centralized exchanges to find exit liquidity for the VCs and the insiders. And the result is anything that's new. And that's why I analyzed the FDMC, fully diluted market cap, very quickly. You'll see that these puppies, they launch at high market valuations and then they fall. All of them fell. Everything that was released over the last 6 months, with the exception of Meme, which is a meme coin, Ordinals, which has no tier 1 VC, and Jupiter, which had Solana Momentum, and Jito, Solana Momentum as well, and Whiff, another meme coin. Anything that had a VC behind it flunked. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I will start with it because I feel so angry. Actually, I just fell into crypto when the whole ICO thing was going on, and of course I didn't know what was going on, but I did realize that actually a lot of people in all kinds of countries all over the world can actually buy on some sort of equal playing field, and then the whole ICO thing kind of fell on its own head, and it kind of snowballed into an avalanche of scams, and it got shut down for good reasons, and I was happy to see that. And then I thought, okay, this is going to get better from this point. And actually, I think that the situation right now is even worse than the situation was where at the height of the ICO scam avalanche in 2017, what is it? It's like 7 years ago. And because now it's like private sales instead. So coins start kind of behind closed doors, and retail cannot buy anything because they're not accredited investors. So they set up deals with VCs and other people, and kind of sell to them at very low prices. And then they goes out with a big market campaign, and retail, they now need to buy after. Last time, 7 years ago, they could at least buy, they had at least a chance to buy early. No, now they have to buy after. And that's when the VCs who bought at like 100 times lower prices are selling. And it's kind of an orchestrated dumping from VCs onto retail. And I don't like it. I'm actually quite angry about that. That's why I wanted to start. Mando, what do you see here?
We spoke about this a lot last week, right? This was the sentiment that has come out, and then since then we've seen stuff like this, which just puts it in just the cold light of day. X memes, most of these coins are down 40 to 80%. It is a crazy move in Binance Launchpad coins. I think it points to a few different things this cycle. Number one, we haven't seen as many people come. This hasn't felt like the last cycle in that all your friends are asking you about crypto. It's been a Bitcoin-led cycle, and there's been some adoption on things like Solana, but this isn't the cycle where everyone's coming in and buying different altcoins. So there hasn't been the buyer of these Binance Launchpad coins. Secondly, I think this is the number one thing that people are talking about on the timeline right now. There's a big question about how to do crypto properly. The reason why people have flocked to meme coins is because of this exact economics, like the fact that everything is out there, fully diluted from the start. I think VCs are going to have to really question how they do crypto going forward, and even teams. Like, this is not good for crypto. The amount of people that rail against meme coins as being bad for crypto, this is worse. This is way worse. Like, you can't look at all these and go like, I invested in crypto and I'm down 70% in 3 months because VCs and whatever project teams have been dumping on me. The way that we do VC in crypto and investment of projects has got to change. Because, like, you're right, it was actually better during the ICO era. Yeah, there were people being sold snake oil, but this where you can only get invested at the point where the VC then can dump on you down 70%. That's also not a better scenario for anyone. So I think it speaks to why people have flocked to away from utility and towards memes. Basically, that crypto is best as a form of currency for transaction rather than utility. And part of it is just the way that these deals have been done. So I just think it came out perfectly after we spoke about it last week. You can buy things which have massive adoption, and you can get dumped on for many years, and you can sit there and go like, why did I invest in crypto? And I think it's really got to change. And what I've liked is that a bunch of VCs have come out. Some of them there's just been a public discourse about it. Some of them have defended it, but a lot have been like, yeah, it's got to change. And I think you will see that. There's going to be a lot of pressure on big launches going forward now to change their tokenomics.
Also, like, the retailer are a little vulnerable here. They will be fed this great story why this should change the world and everything, and then they will hold it all the way down, until the VCs are down selling and the coin is down 98%, and then they will sell. So don't be that guy. Everyone watching here, if things are not working out, at least cut the losses, reevaluate, and live another day. Don't hold all the way down and close and quit crypto. That's the wrong conclusion, because there are opportunities, and investing, I think, is one of the best. Learning investing, I think, is the most profitable thing you can spend your time on. Just learn not doing the basic mistakes, and then take it from there. That is because there is so much opportunity, and it's not that it's hidden from sight. I think Nvidia is a great example, because it's such anyone who played video games in 90s or 2000s, it's not that they haven't heard about Nvidia, and everyone knew that they were doing crypto mining equipment, and everyone knew that they are supplying chips to AI, and yet people don't take any action. They don't buy any Nvidia, and this is like the coin, I almost said the coin, but the stock has gone from, it's gone 1000x over the period that I've been, around Nvidia, and it's gone 100x from in 8 years. It's like a meme coin, but they're actually doing something. Of course, the time frames are a little bit longer, so need a little more patience. But even if you don't have any patience, from the last entry here, where we had an inverse head and shoulder and then a trend reversal, that is not so long. It's a little over a year, and it's like 4x in a stock that's actually doing something. And now the chart is at a very interesting point. It's at the verge of breaking out into new all-time high. And there's earning on Wednesday. Does any of you follow this? What do you think? You think Nvidia can continue to outperform? Several analysts talk about they're raising their targets, think that AI will continue.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about peak AI, but what people don't understand is these fellows here can sell H100s for the next couple of years. There's still a huge demand. Companies like Tesla, Meta are just buying them hand over fist, but that it has to slow down real soon. And I think around the $1,000 mark, $1,200 mark, it could slow down. But there's rumors that once again, earnings will beat. And there's also rumors of a potential stock split, which would really pump the stock as well. I can't vouch for either of those, but if earnings do miss, it could hit the market hard. Especially, I am in Nvidia. I'm also in a name called Render and Nosana, and they tend to follow. So if Nvidia beats, you can expect those tokens to pump as well. So it's interesting to watch.
Thanks for mentioning that. I forgot to mention, but actually the render chart looks really good as well. And Mando, what's your thought on the whole AI narrative?
I think Nvidia will crush earnings. They have a complete monopoly right now. I think it's going to last for longer than people think it will last. What the stock does after that, I'm not really too sure. I think I'm a long-term buyer or a medium-term buyer of Nvidia around the actual earnings date. It's always difficult, like huge expectations going into it. In terms of crypto, interestingly, the AI narrative has kind of taken a bit of a backseat the last few months even. I think people are looking to this as a potential reversal of that, that we're not anywhere near peak AI, and these companies are going to continue to deliver. I do think there's a lot of snake oil in the crypto AI space as well, but I do think there's some interesting ones, particularly in the DePIN space, which I think could use it. I like things like Render. I like Arweave to a certain extent related to that. Near has been related to that as well in terms of AI. I think you could see a bounce in a number of those different tokens.
Now the top two stocks that people are interested in, MicroStrategy, of course, still looks great. I think we all understand that given how Bitcoin is going. The more questions is around Tesla. There's a lot of people losing hope on Tesla, feeling that it's over, it cannot get back up. And James, you're my authority on Tesla analysis. And guys, if I haven't said it, you should definitely subscribe to James InvestAnswers on YouTube, Mando on Twitter, X. Both links are in the description. And James, you make a great video outlining the economics really of the automation services business versus the product business, because product business, building physical products, is always a difficult business model. You get pressured by competitors and low margin and so on, but there's other options, other possibilities.
Well, we just spoke about Nvidia and AI and compute. Those data centers don't have enough electricity, many people say, on the grid, so they're going to need more renewable sources and crazy battery storage, which I evaluate Tesla market cap of having $1 trillion just based on their Megapack business alone. You talk about all the other stuff. Yes, they do things differently. They built a fleet of nearly 6.6 million cars to get data to nail autonomy, i.e. a robot on wheels that will drive itself. Now that they have that, they can move on to the next business, which is SaaS model, kind of like what Apple did 10 years ago. So that's super interesting. The other cool thing is I just got wind, breaking news right now, that the nag is gone from FSD, which means you don't have to touch the wheel every 2 minutes now to let them know that you're there. They'll do monitoring by internal cab cameras. And that basically is almost the final step before cyber taxi rollout. People say, oh, it'll never be allowed in my town and wherever I am in the world. It doesn't matter. China will allow it. China is where the need is, and certain states in the US already do. So the cybercab, the robotaxi is coming. The Optimus robot is doing productive work in factories already. That's going to be amazing. It'll have the dexterity to nearly be able to play a violin, people say. So it's crazy times. And yes, sometimes stocks, especially the ones of the most hated assets, and I specialize in the most hated assets like Solana and Tesla and stuff like that. Everything, markets are irrational. The Tesla stock price does not underwrite Robotaxi, Megapacks, Optimus robot. It's valued as a General Motors or a Ford, and that's what's bonkers everybody.
James, your microphone. Your
Yeah,
microphone amplifier, I think, is fried. Actually, I think I figured out what's happening. After 1 hour of pressing this, it kind of overheats and starts frying like that. So I think that's our signal that we're pretty much done. We had one more topic, which actually, Mando, you are anyway the grandmaster in my book on the NFTs, the meme coin trans and everything. And I mean, there is a lot of opportunity here, and I am interested in learning more. So do you want to talk a little about that, and then we call it the day?
NFTs, very little is going on right now. It's there was a good stat which came out this week, which was the market cap of PER is now bigger than the top 25 different NFT projects combined. So what you've seen is a lot of the gambling part of the market has moved away from NFTs and towards meme coins, PER being probably the biggest from this cycle. It's actually been a bit of a mixed week for memes. Some of the major Solana memes, including WIF, which has been the biggest winner this cycle, has had a bit of a torrid week and hasn't really rallied with Solana. In fact, the major Solana memes haven't really rallied with Solana. You also we spoke about Pump.Fun. Pump.Fun is the main meme coin launchpad on Solana. That is doing more revenue some days than Solana. That actually had an exploit this week. So you had a little bit of uncertainty there, but that's still dominating. I would still say the biggest gainers this week were meme coins kind of in the 50 range, which went up to like 250. You saw Ponky, which is perhaps the biggest mover this week, which is Solana meme, has a number of different followers. It's done relatively well, but a quieter week, I would say, for left curve stuff like that. Mainly just because some of the market leaders, notably PER and WIF, kind of didn't really sustain the rally from Bitcoin and Solana.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we had over 6,000 viewers here just a second ago, which is, I think, all-time high. I think we have a fantastic period ahead of us. We never know what the market will do tomorrow. So, I mean, we sit here, we speculate, we do our best to make sense of everything, but we don't predict the future of the markets. But we can just identify signs. And I think I agree with what both James and Mando had said here. Bitcoin looks very good. Solana looks very good. But actually, there's a lot of projects that are in downtrend. It's a huge difference from, say, end of last year or beginning of the year. So we have to be surgical. We have to be selective. And in 1 week, we will be back, as always. The anticipation pump was on here. Let's see if we can keep it up for next week's show.
71K, let's do it.
Let's do it. Thank you very much. Thank you, Tak. Thank you for listening. We'll be back. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Bye, guys.